up, sis?
We back at it again.
We are back at it.
How y'all doing out there? First, I wanted to just thank everybody for all of the support and the love you've shown to us in this new endeavor that we've undertaken.
So encouraging.
Yes, very encouraging. Appreciate it. Appreciate all the love. Here's a little disclaimer now. This topic can send this conversation in several directions. But we will try to focus in and not stray all over the place.
Amen.
What am I talking about? I am talking about authentic self. Who is your authentic
self?
How about we just dive right in?
Yeah.
And I have a lot of questions. I don't think I have a lot of answers, but I'm going to throw out a lot of questions for this episode. The first one is, what do we mean when we say authentic self? You go.
Yeah.
You go. Tag.
Yeah.
You it.
Yeah, that's that's a really good question, I think, for folks to think about, myself included, is that sometimes we can get caught up in, our careers, or even, just our lifestyles as parents or wives, or the things that we do. And we give less focus, I would say, on that which is, kind of who the core of our being, who are we? And in that discovery, along with those other hats and roles and things that are important that we play in our lives, we have to know, who God designed us to be. And I believe that our authentic self is, who we are, sort of how we're designed, how He made us, and that's very individual, and how that aligns with, His plan for us.
Yes.
Or His plan for everybody.
Yes.
So how our individual selves align with what His plan is for those who have come to Christ. So there is a roadmap, and it's in the Bible. How we need to live and how we need to love one another, and so we can take those gifts and talents and personalities and characteristics that He instilled in us, and then use them for His glory under the guides of the biblical plan. So
that's good.
That's a long answer.
That was a long answer. You usually don't be giving those long answers. I'll take it. I don't believe that we can define it as an absolute, because each one of us are made uniquely, right?
Sure.
So what's authentic self for me is not going to be for you.
Right.
What we can offer today is just some thoughts about who we believe our authentic self might be, may or may not be. So.
Yeah, and it's a process. It's not something you just wake up and know, or even once you come to Christ that you can identify that right away. It's a process as you get to know, one, yourself. People say, well, spend your 20s trying to figure out, who you are. I think a lot of that's true. Your earlier years, you're trying to identify what are my strengths? What are my best qualities? And then when we compare that to what God has designed, and as He reveals what He purposed for us, then that all comes into alignment, and we become more of our authentic self. And that's, again, that's how I see that.
So I can say, when I think of being my authentic self, I see it as being the person I was created to be, or a better way to say it is being the person that I was created to become. Because I would like to believe that I am in a continuous state of becoming and growing.
Yes.
So then, what or who defines what being your authentic self looks like? for me, it's my faith.
Start there.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said earlier, I got a lot of questions. So we might not have no answers, but I got some questions.
Right.
And you guys can just think on these, and I'll just start.
Selah.
Yeah. So here's one. Is being your authentic self the same as living your best life or being your best self? Another question is, do you hold complete control over the development of your authentic self? Or are there other influences outside of your control that guide, steer, or even misdirect your efforts? And another question would be, do some situations make it untenable to be your authentic self? Or can you and even should you be your authentic self no matter the situation or the circumstances? Like I said, I don't know that we have the answers, but I can try to respond to the questions from my perspective. You want to add something before I head down that long road?
Well, as you're reading the questions, I'm thinking, when I think about just the term authentic self, the term itself is a little bit, selfish, if you will, but it more relates to, the flesh. So when I'm being my authentic self, I'm being me, and that wouldn't, I guess when you think about the term, it's about, more about me and not necessarily, because you're saying, can you still be your authentic self, even when you're in challenging times? And so, yeah, I can be, who my flesh is made up to be and responding to things, or, how I see things. But it's the other part of that, like they say, what would Jesus do? It's like, unless and until you include the what would Jesus do part of it, I think your authentic self, can be flawed in that situation.
Because it's not who you were created
It's not who you were created to be. Yeah. So I think we can't separate. I mean, they're kind of mutually exclusive. Like, you can be your authentic self, but that may or may not align with who God designed you to be.
Yep. So that's good. Along those lines, my theory is that when you are your authentic self, you are being your best self. And I say that because when you are walking in who you were created to be, then you can reason that you are being your best self, at least in those moments.
I could see that. I think that, there's some honesty and purity in that. If you're blessed to know and get to a point where you feel like you are operating in your authentic self, because that takes some work. It's like I say, sometimes identity can get caught
continuous.
Up into in who you are as a career, or your mom, or whatever. But if you can get to a point in life where you feel like you can truly identify with who you are and operate in that, then yeah, absolutely. I think it's a gift.
Yeah, and I don't know that we operate in it all the time.
Sure.
Because we're not perfect.
Yeah.
So we're striving to become who we were created to be, or to become. I do say that I would hesitate to say we hold complete control over anything, really.
Absolutely.
I just don't believe that we do. But I do believe that some of the choices we make could either assist in our development or hinder it. There are outside influences that could guide, steer, and even misdirect our efforts.
Most definitely.
As far as how a situation or circumstance might impact whether you can or even should be your authentic self, in my opinion, you can be your authentic self while also aligning with what is appropriate in any given situation. Now, whether we decide to do that would be a choice we would have to make.
Yeah, and even I think as we're on the journey to discovering who we are, even if we haven't completed that journey, but yet we are in relationship with Christ and we're learning about, his purpose for us, and we're operating in that, I think really that's the most critical part.
Yes.
Even if we haven't quite gotten comfortable with, how to use our gifts, or how to, manage, I should say, manage our gifts. People of different varying personality styles and those sorts of things. As we're learning how to manage that, I think the focus should be on, what God wants us to be, and the rest will come into alignment.
Yes. Mm-hmm. But look, I have even more questions to throw out.
You and your questions.
Yes. Okay, here we go. 1. So, how does being my authentic self actually play out in everyday living?
Yeah.
What does it really look like?
Right.
Practically, what does that really look like? How would one know if they were, for the lack of a better description, walking in one's authentic self in that moment? I think you mentioned something about if you're thinking, what would Jesus do?
Yeah.
And you doing the opposite?
Yeah. I think essentially, I'll speak for myself, but I hope that most people can relate to this. But I think, we hold our own selves to a certain standard, of kindness and thoughtfulness and patience. And, and so when we're dealing with other people, I think, we oftentimes have to remind ourselves, of those things.
Yes.
So, and so that is being true to who you are and who you want to be, a person of of virtue and kindness, and so it is a intentional, I think, effort we make when we're engaging with people.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. What can we expect to happen when we walk in or don't walk in our authentic self? Isn't it okay if we struggle from time to time, or even if we find it challenging to be our authentic self? And is consistency important?
Well, I think growth is important.
Yes.
Growth is important. I mean, it's like dieting. Like, okay, well, today I slipped and ate a biscuit. Tomorrow I'll do better.
Yeah.
So yeah, I absolutely believe that it's continuous growth, as you mentioned earlier. None of us are perfect, and we just strive to do better every day.
Are you always comfortable being your authentic self?
I don't think it always is comfortable. I mean, sometimes we want to go against our own natural, tendency. And, if somebody forgets your grocery item, or the car hits its brakes in front of you suddenly. I know one of my pet peeves in driving is when someone hits the brakes before the turn signal. And so I have to manage that frustration when I'm on the road. But, sometimes I would like to just kind of, release that. But again, you hold yourself to a certain standard.
Well, you know why I think you're not always comfortable? It's because of something that you reminded me of during one of our chats. I think you said that there's a realization that we are putting ourselves out there and being vulnerable as we share with our listeners.
Amen.
And so likewise, when you are being your authentic self, in essence, you are in some ways opening up yourself to be vulnerable. For me, I see myself as authentic when I strive to embrace a spiritual covering that to its core exhibits compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. When I am living out these behaviors day to day, I truly believe I am walking in my authentic self. I am becoming the person I was created to be. However, if for one reason or another I allow myself or allow what I would call worldly coverings such as fear, anxiety, selfishness, greed, or distrust overshadow the spiritual coverings which create the essence of who I am, I then am no longer walking in my authentic self. Truth be told, when I am not my authentic self, I am out of sorts and things generally are not clicking or I'm not in sync. Sometimes for me, I find myself taking on some of those worldly cover-ups or coverings, as I call them, for what I may experience as necessary for my self-preservation. I would even suggest we may in some ways be conditioned to wear those extra worldly coverings, particularly as it might relate to being trusting of others. And since I have already put myself out there, I might as well share that I have sometimes been selective with who I showed kindness and compassion to. And certainly there is no question I find myself sometimes being impatient, all of which are worldly coverings or cover-ups that overshadow the spiritual coverings. I am so thankful that I can rely on my faith in God to really reel me back into the person I have been created to become. So those worldly cover-ups are merely temporal as long as I hold on to my faith. And as you said earlier, this is a growth process. We will stumble from time to time. Even if for a moment I get down on myself, the belief I have in God's grace always provides what I need to get up and keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can, doubt and fear and, confusion or, we're sometimes our worst critic when it comes to things. And so, they can keep us from sort of presenting in ways that we want. Which is all the beauty of, having a God that we can, look toward and, and know that, especially, if we're in Christ for any long period of time, then we know that, our spirit is convicted when we do things that either are against our own convictions or, against His will for us. And so, you immediately, you're checked.
Yes.
So you can just go to Him and ask for that forgiveness, and He will forgive us, and we try to do more better next time.
If I were to use one word to sum up the spiritual covering that is foundational to me being my authentic self, it would be love. 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 Interestingly, the Tony Evans Study Bible defines love as the decision to compassionately, righteously, responsibly, and sacrificially seek the well-being of another. So I suppose that being my authentic self really has everything to do with me seeking the well-being of others, and not so much about how I see myself, then is what am I doing for the well-being of others?
I see authenticity as it relates to being in different environments. We spend a lot of time thinking about how we respond to things, in our authentic selves. But, when we think about when we're in different types of environments, that maybe people who are not God-fearing people, or they don't have any relationship with Christ, and don't understand, they're not about that life, not about that God life.
Yes.
And how important it is to, have that relationship with Christ so that we can operate in our authentic self, and not get caught up and absorbed into those environments, or even give the give the perception of that, which is so important. There's a scripture, and I wish I had looked it up, but it talks about, being careful not to offend your brother, so to speak. And I think that's so important. You never know who's watching you, and they could, and that could hinder somebody else's walk, because they see, those Christians, they're not worth nothing,
Yes.
And so you really do have to set yourself apart and just walk in your authenticity. Regardless of where you are as well, it's important to know who you are, and so that you're not easy prey to the enemy when you're in different environments. So I think of it in that way too.
Yeah, I think that goes back to when we said no matter the situation or circumstance, because you never know who you might impact at that time. That's good. That's good. It's unusual for you to go on like that.
Like pulling teeth.
Yes.
No, it's. I hesitate a little bit with this topic, but it is a really good subject. I don't think a lot of people like me really spent time thinking about it, but it's a good subject.
I like that. It's different for all of us, right? That's the part I like. I don't have to be somebody else in order to be my authentic self.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to wear well on me. It's got to fit on me because of who I was created to be.
Right. Or you going to look fake and phony and awkward.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. It needs to be true to who you are.
Yes.
I can't walk in a room and be you, and vice versa. Take on your personality. I know my strengths. I know my lane. I know my weaknesses. But it doesn't make me less of a person.
Right.
It's just that's not how God designed me to shine.
Yes.
And so, and I'm okay with that because I feel very blessed. But, we're all very unique. There's space for everybody. So, we don't all have to crowd in the same boat. Everybody wants to be the lead, this and the, the first that. Like, there's room for everybody. Okay.
Yeah. If we all walk in our own authentic self, then it will all fit together.
Yeah.
It would all fit together. Okay, so as we start to wrap up, I want to share something that resonated with me when I was watching the first episode of a new series being released by Our Daily Bread, and it's called Unshakable Moxie. And these are two women who will be traveling around, just talking to other women about their stories. And I think much of what they both were saying relates to what we're talking about in this episode about being your authentic self. Okay. One of the things they shared is that real moxie is being able to admit that I don't feel strong enough.
Sure.
Another statement they made came across to me as exactly how I envision the What You Got Sis podcast as being, and that is that we have no desire to be a part of something where we are just throwing out Christian language and scriptures around haphazardly all over the place because it sounds good. We don't want to be a part of that. We're just trying to, share our experiences and our thoughts about everyday things.
Real life stuff.
Yes. Something else that they shared, and I believe I mentioned earlier, was that being authentic does not mean you have to be all put together.
Right.
And that to be your authentic self, it is sometimes feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And, that you don't always have to have the right answers.
Yeah.
or have everything together. Mm-hmm. Being your authentic self is really allowing yourself to be vulnerable. And we talked about that.
That's good. That is so important. That is so important to highlight. It's not about being all put together all the time. Sometimes being authentic is being vulnerable and letting your guard down and, exposing your flaws. Absolutely. That's good.
One of the hosts even described it as being or feeling fragile. But when I'm being vulnerable, really, I am in a state that's close to being fragile. But I can say that when I am to my core compassionate, kind, humble, patient, and seeking the well-being of others, or basically to sum it up as being loving, I believe I am becoming what I was created to be. And then I can say I am being my authentic self.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's good. I'm of a certain age now, but, I still learn, a lot about just balancing all of that just for myself. It's like I mentioned earlier, for so many years, you're just caught up into the roles that we play in life. And so that's what you need to be. That's what you need to be, that full-time mom. You need to be that career person. You need to be, a lot of things to a lot of people. And so at some point in life, you need to really hone in on, okay, so who am I?
Yes.
Who am I really? And be okay with that. Like if you've had to be, the hold down the fort and be the strong person in the home, for example. I guess, I'm talking about myself, but if you just, if you've had to always be the person who was strong and composed and handle things, then it's not as easy to be vulnerable. But then that is a part of me. So I need to be comfortable and willing to explore that. So I don't necessarily have to expose that to people, but I don't have to hide it either.
Yeah, because who had the time?
Right.
Really, really, who had the time to really think about it? Yeah. So, I'm just thankful that we have an opportunity to just put this out there, and for folks to really think about it and just see how it fits you. Who are you, and who is your authentic self? That's a question that you have to answer for yourself. And with that, I believe that is our time.
All right. Time flies and you're having fun.
Yes. Thank you guys again for tuning in to What You Got, Sis. We again appreciate your support.
Thanks, everyone.
Yes. And so we are out.
God bless. Peace.
Hey.